Benedict Cumberbatch, you absolute madman. I'm a writer first and a fan second. I adore this film, but I'm here to talk about the script. And the script... well, let's just rip the Band-Aid off. So to convince Neytiri to leave their home, Jake, yes that's his name, shut up I know you know it, Sully frames abandoning the Omaticaya tribe, ditching the location of the first film and the guerrilla resistance taking place there, as a decision that will benefit the tribe as well as his own would-be exile family. By leaving, they're drawing the humans away and thus protecting their people. On these terms, she agrees. Jake and Neytiri step down from their leadership roles, they take the kids, and they flee the war effort. But how exactly does that help the tribe? I wondered for a moment until I realized that it really doesn't. It's a lie, and that's the point. Jake insists on this because his prime directive is to protect his children, and he realizes that his children are no longer safe. There's a deadly threat hunting them. The humans have arrived with Morbillion ships to colonize Pandora and suppress the Na'vi through any means necessary. He wants to take his family and run, and despite the additional baggage of her father's dying wish, no biggie, Neytiri ultimately lands on the same conclusion. Her duty as a mother outweighs all else. Surely they don't actually believe they're saving the Omaticaya by leaving, right? Surely they're lying to themselves, and surely there will be a sobering conclusion where they accept that they were trapped between two grisly alternatives and forced to make an unfair choice as parents. Surely they will admit to themselves that they abandoned the tribe for the sake of their own children, right? I was waiting for that scene and it never happened. And I'm giving Cameron the benefit of the doubt by assuming that deep down Jake and Neytiri knew this wasn't a win-win. But despite all of the microphones I planted in his house, I still can't read his mind. I certainly hope he understands that it wasn't, because he's the one who told us the RDA was back in force to clear out the Na'vi so that humanity could come in and establish a civilization. Jake knows it's not just about him. Right? Right, James? I guess the appropriate question before I actually label this a flaw would be whether or not the scene belonged in this movie. I mean, there's at least one more, maybe three, but as much as I love Cameron, I have a lingering suspicion that he's not going to bring it up. His storytelling can usually be taken at face value. When the Omaticaya re-enter the picture, it will probably be a homecoming with no strings attached. As a matter of fact, how did the Omaticaya feel about this? How did Moat feel? I really could have used a scene with her and Neytiri just talking it out as mother and daughter, but it felt like the movie was patting me on the head and saying, don't worry, the forest people will be fine. The reality is though, Jake and Neytiri are either in denial, or they're ignorant, or the story has suffered a major lapse in logic. Even if the first is true, which I hope it is, Neytiri in particular still suffered from the absence of dialogue concerning it. I kept expecting more from this plot thread, and it never happened. I have other issues with this movie's writing, which I'll get to when my arbitrary essay structure deems it so, but at this point I'd like to direct your attention to something I find far more troubling. The way people talk about the Avatar franchise. This should come as no surprise to those of you who are acquainted with my original Avatar deep dive. The video you're currently watching is in every sense a sequel to that one. I continually reference and build off its points, as well as neglect certain issues that I already covered in full the first time around. Namely these arguments here. But in summary, I spoke of how the 13-year gap between installments saw a certain anti-fandom gestate adjacent to this franchise and its creator. A pathological feedback loop of inane, superficial comments that intensified until it was so loud most couldn't distinguish it from actual critique. The state of the anti-fandom is no better exemplified than in this Forbes article by senior contributor Eric Kane. Eric has been writing about video games, culture, and entertainment since 2011. Let it be known on the sight of gods and men that Eric prefers deep conversation and debate to shouting matches. I chose to focus on Eric as opposed to random YouTube commenters because Eric gets paid for this, and that really rubs me the wrong way. The title of his article ends in the word bro. This is a reference to the word with which Neteyam and Loak, two brothers, refer to one another. Eric says this isn't how people raised in a traditional tribe would talk. Okay. But I do think this is a good springboard for me to clarify a few things about language in this film. In the opening scene, we hear Jake's children speaking Na'vi. In Jake's voiceover, he mentions that the Na'vi language might as well be English to him, and then the children's voices morph into ones we can understand. The implication is that all of the Na'vi will be fed to the viewer as whatever language the viewer might speak. This is upheld throughout the movie, with notable exceptions being the scenes where Na'vi interact with humans. In those scenes, the Na'vi dialogue changes back to its original state to highlight the language barrier between the two races. That means bro is not actually canonically the word bro, it's a Na'vi colloquialism for brother. If you find it cringy, fair enough, that's not how I would have written the kids, and while I don't mind the switch to English, I am annoyed by the inclusion of Na'vi words like scown here and there. It's all or nothing, Jim, you gotta commit to the bit. Like Jake tells Tanawari he's seeking...
We seek for Tulkun.
and then translates it.
Sanctuary for my family.
How exactly does that work? And then Eric has some other points which range from clearly hasn't seen my first video to this is a matter of personal preference that I can't argue against to why are you as a professional journalist using an apostrophe to create a plural? The criticism that this film is the same as the first has cropped up a lot, and I've noticed that it usually starts with the colonizer humans are back again. And I'm like, yeah? What did you think the plot of this series was going to be? Not the massive existential threat? The first film left a singular loose end in the form of the humans that wasn't about to be a one-and-done thing. Originally, their presence consisted of a mining operation guarded by a private security force. Now that they know the threat, they come fully armed. They start by glassing the forest with their afterburners, annihilating most of the land that the first film was spent defending. This was the appropriate way to reintroduce the humans. Anything less than this would have been incompetence. The time jump was also natural, given that space travel is known to take so long in this universe. And then people will say, the humans want resources again. Like, yeah, they didn't stop needing those, even unobtainium. The mines are mentioned, they're just not a focal point of this film. But if the natural progression of the plot leads to a familiar dynamic, then so be it. All in all, I think the 09 film can be seen as a prelude to the actual Na'vi-human war that the sequels will cover. But the similarities don't stop there. The protagonist has to learn the ways of a different culture, again. What do you mean it happens in a completely different context than in the first movie? Look at him, he's learning to ride an animal. It's the same exact story. It's not like bonding with animals is a massive part of this world that's likely to occur in every installment several times, purely due to the established mechanics of war and travel. No. This is ripping itself off. He's bonding with the whale? Ugh, it's just the bird again. What do you mean the Tulkun are a completely different sentient race that has absolutely no narrative resemblance to the bird? Fuck off, it's the same thing. And a tree, another spirit tree? God, it's almost like the neural network of Pandora is another established mechanic that unites all of the Na'vi, and that we're explicitly told in the first film that there are other sites like the Tree of Voices. What, are we supposed to expect every tribe to have this thing? This essential thing that defines their biology and symbiosis with the planet? Yes, I'm all for having consistent magic systems until my eyes have to endure the same thing twice. And I swear to God, if there's a battle at the end... Oh my God, a battle in the third act of the action movie? Are you kidding me? Just humans versus Smurfs all over again. He's even ripping off the abyss due to the presence of water. Shameful. That's the best way I can describe Way of Water. James Cameron is being indulgent here to excess. There's an arrogance on display that I just find very off-putting. Okay, so this is a core tenet of the Avatar Hatedom. They really don't like James Cameron. They want his movies to fail out of a very personal sense of spite. Usually it seeps out into comment sections concerning the upcoming sequels. How dare he plan ahead? But Eric isn't very clear about what constitutes self-indulgence or arrogance on screen. I'm gathering that he's referring to the visuals. If this is true, then his argument is basically, it was okay to have gorgeous, colorful, over-the-top CGI visuals back in 2009 because it was harder to do, but now that so many others have done it, you should make your images uglier? Like, I do understand what he's saying with regard to audiences getting used to crazy CGI, but I'm not entirely sure what he's advocating for. Why not continue to have cool images? Why does it matter that they're more common? But don't worry, he at least admits that some parts were fun and neat. And get this, cool. Riveting stuff. Oh, hi Mark Kermode, longtime The Guardian contributor. Hey, just between you and me. In 7 paragraphs, Mark references 15 other movies as if to remind his audience that he is indeed the movie guy whose opinions matter. Among that list is Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and of course he's a prequel hater, we should have seen this coming. Bonus points if he takes a dig at Jar Jar Binks. Fucking Gen X. Okay, I've never felt the need to mention it, but since the opportunity has arrived in a cute little package on my doorstep, yes, a fair amount of my Avatar defenses could be copied and pasted onto the Star Wars prequels. Maybe I'll talk about those one day. Mark also likes to append as many adjectives as possible to every clause, like he's trying to fill a word count or hide the fact that his arguments are literally just the contents of the Avatar Hater bingo card, which is an official thing that I did not make up. A statement like this seems so big, so powerful, as if to speak for the masses, but if you take a step back, you realize that these critics aren't actually engaging with the text at all. They don't talk about character consistency or plot holes or anything a person like me could refute. They watch a movie or show and then they type up an essay about their personal experience of watching it. But there's nothing wrong with a subjective angle, of course. So what's got me all riled up? Why can't I just accept that so-and-so doesn't like Avatar 2 because he got bored in the theater and move on with my life? Well, it's because these people aren't just so-and-sos. They have opinions that get to exist in designated spaces. They're given advanced screening so that they can inform the populace about whether or not a piece of media is worth consuming. And I understand their niche in principle, but the reality is that their takes begin and end with them. And the only reason they have a platform is because they've been doing this for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years or whatever number they proudly tout as a justification. Here on YouTube, there is no seniority. Creators can blow up overnight if they write something intelligent enough, and they can lose their stations just as quickly. And while I don't think their success is always deserved, it is at the very least actual fucking success, dependent on the content itself. These critics aren't even selling points for their own work. And I know that because the links to their reviews never say, here's what Mark Kermode thinks about Avatar. They just say the article's title. You don't know who wrote it and you don't care because you Googled, is Avatar 2 good? And this is what popped up. This man's opinion. Again, compare it to YouTube where I'll get genuinely stoked to watch a video about a show I haven't even seen purely because a creator has earned my respect by putting out so many banger videos. And here's a take you might not like, most of these critic reviews are spoiler-free, and spoiler-free reviews do not have any objective substance whatsoever. Think about it. If a person refuses to talk about the story so as to not spoil it, what exactly are they going to talk about? How are you operating without a personal brand, yet getting paid to voice your personal feelings? Like, I know why I have a platform. It's because 16,000 individual human beings for whom I am extremely grateful found my content to be engaging, informative, or otherwise worth watching, and they subscribed to me, not to the giant media collective that pays me to take up space, me. And the same goes for every other creator on this platform. Say what you will about YouTube, but at least there is a game to be played. Corporate media journalism, on the other hand, is a bug that needs to be patched. I'm tired of seniority and cronyism deciding who gets the megaphone, regardless of what they say. And of course that doesn't help. Eric over here devotes the back third of his Avatar review to proudly explaining his revised Little Man scale. Revised as in he saw the 5-tier rating system Roger Ebert thought was perfect, and with the indomitable human spirit burning in his eyes, he said we can do better. Is this a joke? Should I admire these people for gaming the industry so hard? Do I just not get the journalism scene? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Look, I'm gonna level with you. I thought I would spend a solid hour at least covering shitty Avatar 2 critiques, but the more I looked, the more I found of the same old dismissals. There are, save for the accusations of retreading, no new strains of hate for me to vaccinate this IP against. And there are valid criticisms of this script to be made. I'm not going to dispute that, but the thing is, practically nobody is making them. So yeah, a lot of the stuff from the original Avatar video could easily apply to this movie as well, though I do think Avatar 2009 was a pound-for-pound better film. But I'm going to take a break from talking about the movie, and I'm just going to talk about the movie. What a thing, right? Jacob was in the last one, and now he's in this one. His consciousness has been transferred permanently into his avatar body. We don't know what happened to his original human body. It's probably dead and rotting, but there's a chance it could be alive. When Grace Augustine died, her avatar remained alive despite not having a consciousness floating around inside of it. Maybe it works the other way around. Following the events of the first film, Jake is Oloete Khan of the remaining Omaticaya people. Moat is still Sahik, which means Neytiri, despite being Jake's mate, is not the official Dragon Lady Priestess on the block. Jake and Neytiri are raising 4 children at present, Neteyam, Kiri, Loak, and Tuktiri. Kiri, Jake explains through voiceover, was mysteriously formed in the womb of Grace's unconscious avatar body. He and Neytiri adopted her around the same time they had Neteyam. Jake's voiceover stuck out to me because while the voiceover from the first film was in-universe, playback from his video logs, he now seems to be talking directly to us, the audience. If this is true and we're not hearing audio from a later recording, then I do not like it because it breaks a structural precedent. Additionally, it adds very little of substance beyond the opening monologue. Usually VO Jake tells us something extremely obvious. When Tanawari locks arms with him and welcomes his family into the Metkaina, Jake says, "And just like that, we were sea people." My writing process involves cutting the fat, and Jake's voiceover is fat of the most cuttable variety. But I will come right out and say, aside from that one thing I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, Jake is written very cohesively in this movie. His presence as a father is arguably the most important slice of the script. I've already heard some complaints about how he allegedly did a character 180 and became a coward, and that, my jolly good fellow, is some bullshit. Leading up to this movie, Jamcam talked about how it would actually explore the reality of family. The majority of stories that attempt to tackle the theme, he argues, end up half-assing it. The responsibility of having children is allowed to coexist with Hollywood heroism and self-sacrifice. Seldom does the hero feel the need to curb their self-sacrificial tendencies for the sake of their children. If anything, they know that they have to get out there and put their lives on the line to make the world a better place for their kids to grow up in, which is a win-win thematically. I've never really talked about Marvel on this page because I don't watch most of their content, but I did see Avengers Endgame in 2019, and after my second viewing of TWOW, I caught a really cool parallel that I want to talk about. Basically, after the time jump in that movie, Tony Stark is also saddled in with a family. He is reluctant to get out there and be his old heroic self because now he has duties as a father that he can't just run away from. Then his daughter says she loves him, he figures out time travel, he makes the decision to rejoin the fight off screen, and in about 15 minutes of runtime, he's ready to kick some ass for the greater good. Tony's character change happens in about 2 scenes. Jake Sully undergoes the same change, but it takes him literally the entire movie because, surprise, surprise, it's not that simple. In the first act, Jake is waging a guerrilla war against the humans. His 2 teenage sons, whom he allows to participate on the fringes of the war effort, clearly feel the need to live up to his legendary status as a warrior. Loak especially is idealizing the cut-and-dry self-sacrificial hero that Jake was in the first film. But while Jake still has that dog in him, his new dimension as a parent ironically makes him wish the opposite for his children. When his sons express the same spirit that he himself commits so fully to, he shuts them down. Because instead of using Jake's family as an excuse to amplify his heroic nature, Cameron positions them opposite one another. His children need him, and that's not a cute way of saying they need him to go out and fight and make the world a better place. They require his literal presence and protection. Tony Stark had kind of an easy out because his support system was so big. If he died, his daughter would still have, let's be honest here, a massive group of powerful people that would never let any harm come to her and would make sure she had the best life possible. But the Omaticaya are a small, minimally equipped group of people at war. Nobody's coming to save them. Nobody can be a father to Jake's kids but him. This is where I think the scope of Avatar works to its advantage. You could be fooled into thinking you're watching an entry in a big, sprawling cinematic universe, but the reality of this story is that it's always been finite. Avatar is a character-centric drama like Titanic, disguised as a sci-fi blockbuster. I'm writing a huge video about House of the Dragon and world building, and it's helped me realize that the lore for this universe is honestly not that extensive. We don't get sprawling family trees that go back hundreds of years. We don't get detailed accounts of the early voyages to Pandora and the different companies and interest groups at play. The state of the Earth and how it got that way is reduced to a few sentences. This is happening in the distant future, but other than Tom Sully and kind of Neytiri's older sister, we don't have a single named character who died before the story started. Hundreds of years of history leading up to this. Not a single main player, no big CEOs, nothing. There are wars on Earth between countries that may or may not be the ones we have today, but we know nothing about those wars except for the offhand references that Quaritch makes in the first film. There was a war in Venezuela, there was a war in Nigeria. When? Over what? George R.R. Martin would have freaked this shit. Yes, we know all the names of the plants and animals and machinery, and occasionally a fun detail that alludes to the specific geopolitics of the universe, like how the amp suits were manufactured by Mitsubishi, not to mention the fully functioning alien language, but we don't even have a dated timeline of the events on Earth and the voyages to Pandora, much less anything on what the Na'vi were up to outside of their own cultural superstitions, and this is not an issue with Avatar's quality, I'm just pointing it out to illustrate why Avatar is different. This world was made for its core characters. It exists to house them and their struggles. Despite being visually big, it is thematically intimate. The Way of Water is about a family unit. Jake and Neytiri have to modulate themselves because they are parents first. So when the Recoms almost abduct their kids in the forest, the answer isn't as simple as, wow, now we really gotta beat these guys. I did express my problems with Jake's secondary reasoning for leaving the Omaticaya, being that they would also be saved in theory. But to the film's credit, the Recoms are an especially dangerous force that is specifically after Jake and his family, so drawing them away is a positive for the Omaticaya, the only question being, does it outweigh the loss of Neytiri and Jake, two hyper-competent warriors? It's hard to say. But Jake's primary reasoning for leaving checks out fully. He was confronted with the reality that his children would not be safe in this war. And so after he convinces Neytiri, the family packs up and leaves, thus capping off the first act. I think Jake shines even more in the second act, which might be perplexing given that he takes a backseat to the kids, but God, I cannot describe how down I am for all the little conversations Cameron gives him with his children. Honestly, because those conversations are something I forget in my own writing. Conversations that don't move the plot forward. Conversations that serve no purpose beyond showing the reality of relationships. The in-between moments, the downtime, the love. If trimming down runtime means cutting scenes like Jake affirming his neurodivergent daughter, fuck it, 3-hour gang. The structure of the second act is largely the kids go out and do a dumb thing, and then Jake has to step in and resolve it. You know, parenting. And he's harsh sometimes. His desire to raise them into competent adults competes with his instinct to protect them, along with the fact that he has to answer to his hosts. He's aware of the reality that he puts everyone around him at risk. And when Tanawari tells him the Recoms burnt down a village, he hopelessly asks, did anyone die? But what can he do? I think it's an awesome bit of characterization that Jake's military thinking takes over when he becomes stressed, like making his kids call him sir, using call signs, barking orders. It's all he's ever known. I'm glad his military background isn't relegated to a bit of trivia. It's not a quirk, it's a natural extension of his background that manifests in the script in each and every one of his lines. It's personality derived from purpose. And while I won't disagree that the dialogue between the kids isn't exactly musical, that tends to go away the moment the scene has Jake or any adult character in it. And since I want to get all the pieces on the board before I start talking about the final act, I'm going to go down the list of characters as usual. Despite how large she looms over the finale, Neytiri's role in this movie was diminished. Her feelings about the Omaticaya should have been more turbulent throughout the second act, but nobody brings that up because they're safe, remember? They're safe, this guy has it covered, don't worry about it. She slots naturally into Jake's struggle with fatherhood as the one who counterbalances his militaristic tendencies. This is a family, not a squad. But those great little scenes Jake gets with his kids, she doesn't have as many of. I think unlike most people, my problems with this movie are scenes that don't exist. Her dynamic with Spider is super intriguing. She doesn't like that he's a human being living among them. He reminds her of his father and the humans that killed so many of her people. It's a natural gut reaction for her to have. But Jake should be the one pointing out to her that he himself was human. She should have to struggle with her own hypocrisy with Spider, if not in this movie, then in the series as a whole. Part of me feels like I should tread lightly on this stuff because we're now in a serialized story. Who am I to say this beat should happen in part 2 and not part 4? But on the other hand, he was standing right there when she said it. The only reason it was just one line and not a whole conversation was because we were still in the opening montage and it wasn't time to slow down and have a proper scene yet. These two will have a lot of unpacking to do though. I was happy their relationship didn't get a resolution this early, but I really hope that it gets the attention it needs in the next film. I've heard that Avatar 3, The P-Pusher, might explore the more brutal aspects of the Na'vi, which would be a sharp turn from the angelic and morally unquestionable beings that we're used to. I'm on board with that. Neytiri's characterization is still strong. I like that she's not really willing or able to adapt to the Metkayina. Of all her family, she's the only one who was raised to adulthood in one undiluted culture. Change carries more weight for her. Cameron respects that. But again, I wish we got more actual scenes depicting this. In the current cut, it manifests in the background and through smaller behavioral cues. It never comes to a head. I feel like I'm shorting Neytiri by not having more to say about her presence in the first 2 acts, but there's just not a ton to talk about.
I'm pretty sure he has a kid called Ateo.
Neteyam is cool. Looking back on it, he is fully a supporting character for Loak's arc, and that's fine. Neteyam is the perfect first son that Loak will never live up to. Loak overcompensates by trying to be bolder and braver and cooler, and it always blows up in his face. Neteyam chooses to take the heat for his brother's failings. This beat repeats several times with increasing intensity, and the only appropriate climax is inevitable. Neteyam gets shot, literally covering for his brother. He's a functional supporting character. I think his purity and perfection work well when you consider that he dies. In death, the noble first son who could do no wrong is in a better place to serve the story than he would be if he were alive. But Loak and Kiri, I'm worried, occupy too much of the same thematic territory, which might strike some people as odd because they're so completely different. But ultimately, both are characters who feel inadequate, struggle with fitting in and meeting expectations, but come into their own and prove that their differences are what make them strong. This individual said in his TWOW video that Loak's feeling of being outcast wasn't quite corroborated by the actual facts of his arc. He feels second to his older brother, which causes him to do brazen things and prove himself, which always backfire and incur his father's disappointment. That much tracks. He also has some human features which could contribute to a sense of social isolation, fair enough, but the guy's still pretty chill. I mean, he's socially normal, however angsty, but he's got a good grasp on who he is and what he wants. He's not fundamentally weird in the way he thinks he is, and I guess that speaks to his own self-perception more than it speaks to a flaw in the script. But what's interesting is that Kiri is fundamentally weird. Her very nature stops her from participating in normal Na'vi activities. I've been contemplating whether or not these characters could conceivably be combined into one character who is both fundamentally different like Kiri and deals with it like Loak does, overcompensating in the other direction with a massive chip on their shoulder only to eventually develop a healthy relationship with what makes them unique. It's not so much an issue of depth as it is one of efficiency. I think if I didn't combine them, I would at least give them dialogue that reflected this difference, but going off this movie alone, I'd probably just combine them. Tuktiri is a literal child. I was not expecting her to bring much to the table, but to me she seems like a piece that's been put in place for later. We know that there is a substantial time jump in the first act of movie 4, and I think that she'll probably get up to some cool stuff after that. I've always talked about how Cameron is very utilitarian in his creation of characters, and he wrote the sequels together, so I feel like there's a good chance she won't always be comic relief kid, especially after seeing all this insane shit at such a young age. Until then though, she works just fine for me and she doesn't get in the way.
Among us.
I don't have much to say about these two, except that their army disappears in the middle of the final battle. What? Come on, Jim, I can't defend this. I'm sorry. People will say it's because of the ring of fire around the boat, but they vanished long before that. I could have used a reason. You want to have your climactic final sequence with the family on the ship, I get it, but you can't just put an entire army on pause. God, this makes me so angry. Just cut away for a moment to show that they're still caught up in the fighting, maybe somewhere out of the way. Because I'm not going to patch things up with headcanon, and the battle in Avatar 2009 is honestly my favorite battle from any movie ever, in part because it balances its moving parts so well and has such a natural ebb and flow that incorporates all the different variables the movie had spent its entire runtime establishing. But aside from that, Renal and Tanawari serve as the two necessary perspectives the story needs to generate drama from the family settling in with the new tribe. She rejects them, he welcomes them, more or less. And then there's the Colonel. Okay, I suppose before I get into this character, I should resolve the issue of whether or not his existence is in fact justified. See, this Quaritch is a recombinant. Upon his death in the first film, the RDA saved a copy of his mind on a chip. They sent that chip back to Earth. It was loaded onto an avatar body made in Quaritch's likeness. Now, I certainly don't think the mechanic of downloading consciousness onto a chip is a problem in and of itself. Humanity in this series is able to quantify consciousness such that it can transmit it to a remote piloted flesh body, grown using an apparent mastery of genetic engineering. If anything, I'm led to believe a piece of hardware would pose less of a challenge. This body was being grown prior to his death. We know this because he mentions it in a video log filmed prior to his death. Now, we know growing avatar bodies is extremely expensive. If it weren't, the plot of the first film wouldn't make any sense. And we know that Quaritch was a stepper of the bigger persuasion. Remember, if you will, that his failure in the first film came down to an insane supernatural twist that nobody anticipated. Other than that, his plan was working. He crushed the Na'vi themselves in the final battle. The fact that it was just him, Jake, and Neytiri in the final fight wasn't a contrivance. It was literally just because he killed all of the Na'vi warriors. A point was made that there was nobody left in the sky as the final bombing run approached. He was a competent military leader through and through, and this competence was likely why the RDA saw fit to clone him, the failure of his final mission aside. This is one of those things that I see as plausible, but I also don't consider plausible as the highest grade of story beat. I prefer to ask, does the story naturally lead to this? And the answer in the case of Recon Quaritch is not exactly. It takes a lot of retconning to work as well as it does. No, it's nothing remotely close to somehow Palpatine returned. I won't have people spouting that nonsense, but it's iffy all the same. And if you detect a smidge of pain in my voice, it's because this is no small story choice. I would rather that our apparent main antagonist not be built on, I guess it's possible. But once you get over the potential roadblock of his entire existence, Recon Quaritch is handled fairly well. His reaction to being reborn in the big blue body is perfectly in character from all we know about him. He's very level-headed and pragmatic about the whole thing, but the reality is that he died, and neither he nor the film take that lightly, which I appreciate. We're shown that he does think about it constantly, every time he sees one of Neytiri's arrows, but he doesn't let it impede his judgment, at least not consciously. Quaritch and the other Recoms are tasked with killing Sully. None will dispute that this makes sense so long as Sully is leading a guerrilla army against the humans, but once he flees, Quaritch's reason for continued pursuit may be lost on some. It's important to remember that the humans don't know the specifics of Jake leaving. Honestly, I don't know how they find out at all, but regardless, I'll buy that they can spare the resources to go after the military leader who upended their last operation. Even if he's currently between seasons, his inactivity doesn't dull his clout or his fighting ability. As a precaution, it makes sense to just take him off the board and be done with it. Now, I don't find it preposterous that this chiseled Chadley champion got someone pregnant before he died. Are you really going to tell me he wasn't pumping anything but iron? No, it wasn't a plot point in the first film, but did it need to be? Everything we knew about Quaritch was relevant to his role in that movie, and now there's an additional factor that we're given more knowledge about. As far as their dynamic in the film goes, I thought it worked well enough. Like, there was nothing wrong with it, but there could have been a lot more right with it. On that, I defer to Schnee. In his video, he breaks down the long speculated plot thread of Spider pining after an avatar body. It's something I would have leveraged purely because it's such a natural continuation of his feeling of otherness among the Na'vi. It's something a character in his position would, by every metric of intention and obstacle, want. But instead of offering him an avatar body, Quaritch tries to win him over by taking him out and showing him cool military stuff. This is pretty in character for Quaritch, so I don't have a problem with it. Speaking of which, when he looks into the webcam and says Semper Fi, peak Cameron cheese. I love it, I wouldn't change a thing. Oh, and his reuse of lines from the first Avatar bugs people, but let me remind you that the "you're not in Kansas anymore" thing was literally part of his security briefing. He probably said it to every new batch of recruits that landed on Pandora. That was his job, he was the head of security. But his development in this movie calls into question something much more important, which is Eywa and how she works. We establish early on that the animals of Pandora now carry out what could be described as an immune response to the human invaders. They always attack helicopters after a few minutes. This is a great way of following through on the paradigm shift that happened in the final battle of Avatar 1. Eywa took sides, that much hasn't changed. But something a little more questionable is the blind spot Eywa now has to the avatars, apparently. They're able to slip by without getting attacked by the local fauna, which is to say some viper wolves walk right up to them before literally going, "Oh my bad, I didn't know you were chill like that," and then leaving. You may remember that Jake's avatar body did not stop him from getting targeted by those same creatures. Maybe it's just a matter of how hungry they were, they are predators after all, and the canonical change in the magic system of Eywa might have simplified things a bit, but it's hard to know. Webcam Grace expresses some uncertainty about whether or not the goddess of Pandora is actually intelligent in the sense that we understand that word to mean. So maybe this unquantifiability is just something that comes with Eywa.
It come with Eywa.
The recoms all claim their own Ikran. This process was, in the first film, framed as a largely tactical challenge, but there was still an element of fate given to it. It was a rite of passage, the creation of a sacred bond. We don't really get any of that here. The challenge is purely tactical. The Ikran is a cool new toy. Would Quaritch treat it like that? Oh yeah, but I would add a scene where we actually see the psychic bond happen between him and the creature. Like, this is the first time he connects to the environment. I'd make it so that he taps into the thing and, for the briefest of moments, sees the world from its perspective, before brushing it off, obviously. But maybe he's still at odds with it after that. Maybe the creature fights with him because they're so not on the same page. Did he turn it evil? I mean, I guess the mounts ultimately obey their riders, even if it is described as a two-way connection, but I literally physically couldn't go much longer without talking about the actual MVP of this whole movie. You already know what the fuck is up. It's Okay, so the Tulkun are another misunderstood aspect of this movie, because if you pay very close attention, they are not, in fact, big dumb sea animals. They're people. They're more advanced than humans, which to the humans is baffling because they don't display traits that we typically associate with intelligence. Cameron, like he did with Eywa in the first film, is incorporating an adjacent form of intelligence that is fundamentally different from our own and saying, this is valid. And yet people are still watching the movie and coming away with, "Oh, they like whales a lot. It's an anti-whaling movie." Like, no. My friend, you might be projecting dumbness onto these creatures against all evidence simply because they aren't bipedal humanoids. Look at what the movie is showing you. The Tulkun could form ranks and eviscerate the humans if they wanted to, but they literally have a philosophical doctrine that prevents them from doing so. I think that's pretty crazy. So Payakan, the killer outcast, thwarts Quaritch's plan to bring Jake aboard in what I think is a brilliant moment of chaos happening to alter the story and make it so that the battle can happen. Because that chaos is actually well-founded. It pays off the dynamic we spent so long establishing between Loak and Payakan. Now, if you wind the clock back a few minutes, Quaritch wasn't going to kill Jake until Jake got on the ship. His reasoning for this was that the Na'vi would just swarm them if he picked Jake off then and there. But I think his wording does a disservice to the complexity of the situation. I think the best he could have hoped for was to take Jake inside the ship, release the kids, then take him into custody and kill him quietly. But would that stop the Na'vi from attacking? No, they came to avenge the Tulkun. So while I do believe Jake would have walked into certain death to protect his kids, the location of his death wouldn't have stopped a battle from happening. Once Payakan has killed a bunch of people on the ship, he's like, fuck it, then he goes after Harpoon Guy, full tilt, he's not going to pretend to care about their lives, awesome, grounded character action. After Neteyam dies, the eclipse starts and all of the mech hyena disappear. Why, James? Why? Jake and Neytiri storm the ship and kill most of the recoms. Quaritch grabs Kiri and puts a knife to her throat. Neytiri threatens to kill Spider if Quaritch doesn't let Kiri go, and much to his own surprise, he does. Wild scene, 10 out of 10. Neytiri helps the kids to safety and Jake stays behind to kill Quaritch once and for all. You know that video I did a long time ago where I talked about how I don't like when a character wins a fight simply because they fought better? Well, that's what happens here. And don't give me that "he had more of a reason to fight" bullshit. Having a family does not improve one's ability to execute jujitsu combos. Jake wins the fight because he has better fight moves, and I would hate it a lot more if Quaritch actually died, but I can kind of get over it because the winner of the fight doesn't matter. They both drown immediately after it happens, and they're both saved by their sons. Loak saving Jake was gold. I'm not sure why the Way of Water prayer thing was relevant at that moment, but the fact that Loak ultimately made his father proud was the rightest way to end this movie. And the final "I see you" works incredibly well given all of the weight that phrase carries. As for Spider saving his kind of dad, I like it. He didn't swim down there planning to find him. The choice just presented itself, and he had a split second to make it, and he did. This will be a defining moment for him going forward. For better or for worse, we didn't know enough about him beforehand to gauge whether or not this choice was in character, but I guess it is. He was presented with a choice, and he made it, and we learned a lot about him, so we'll see what happens. Oh yeah, and Norm and Max are around. I guess Norm's avatar didn't die in the first one. I was under the impression that that was canon, but I guess not. There's a lot leaning on the plot point of their emergency visit to try and save Kiri. The radar from their chopper allows Quaritch to estimate where they might be headed. It's ultimately what leads to the big confrontation at the end. I don't mind their mistake as a plot point because for all everyone knew, Kiri was dying and they had to rush to save her. It also makes sense that Jake would contact his friends whom he trusts. Even if in the end, smack dab on theme, the Na'vi solution is affirmed as the correct one. Theme is a weird beast. Part of me thinks that I should just exclude themes from my analyses. They're big emotional takeaways that vary from person to person, right? Or are they recurring beats within the story? Or are they real-world commentary embedded in the writing? Do we actually know what themes are? Please tell me we haven't all been referring to this concept without agreeing on a clear definition. Dear God. Look, I think theme is another one of those words that should not just be one word, because if you conceptualize themes as the statements a film wants to make, then you obviously can't factor them into a self-contained discussion about the writing itself. So those I would designate as messages, not themes. Nothing wrong with that, mind you, but they are their own thing. And then I've also used theme alongside premise in the past, but I don't think that's the best way of doing it either. I'll simply say premise when discussing the central idea of a story to make things more clear. But there's also the idea of a theme as a pattern, one that just emerges as a result of the story unfolding naturally, and therein lies an observation without which I don't believe my assessment will be complete. In Avatar: The Way of Water, the pattern is that Jake and Neytiri having a family complicates their heroism. And that's not a grand conclusion I'm extrapolating as a viewer, that's literally just a beat that happens over and over and over throughout the movie. We gotta go back for somebody.
Here. Don't help me, it's dangerous.
I helped you anyway and saved your life.
You could have gotten killed.
Oh, no, I have your kids.
Captured.
Give me the
kids.
The kids got... Instead of just pointing to this as an abject flaw because repetition bad, consider how it reflects the underlying reality of the story. That parenting isn't just a single act of saving the world for these characters, but rather a job that requires never-ending upkeep. Hell, that's half the reason it's so long, because characters feel the need to rush in and save each other, which inevitably leads to more problems. And if at any point you doubted that was purposeful, Jake's voiceover line once they're all finally safe pretty much spells it out. The film ends with Neteyam's funeral, which I'm so happy was given room to breathe, especially since the first film had zero mourning time post-climax, and Jake finally arriving at the conclusion that his family will have to weather the storm ahead. Running didn't get them anywhere. And thus, we are catapulted into an Avatar saga, one that will presumably cover the Pandora Earth conflict and its eventual resolution. This movie got a lot of broad stroke stuff right. You know, big obvious stuff like its depiction of family and the dynamics therein and Payakan, but my participation in any sort of fanery has always been conditional on the quality of the content. And I have to admit, there are more holes in this movie than there were in its predecessor. More contrivances, more points of inefficiency, more missed opportunities, some of which dealt significant blows to character. The fact that I'm willing to point this stuff out should tell you, if nothing else, how sincere I was when I talked about Avatar 2009, because if I were here as nothing more than an apologist for this lovely franchise that I enjoy, I would have exhausted my argumentative reservoirs trying to defend this film's script from its very real shortcomings. Instead, I held both to the same standard and tried to give you my undiluted thoughts. I'm still very much invested in where this story goes, especially after learning that Eywa was meant to be the first half of a much bigger movie. Things are being set up, context is being established, and who knows? Maybe some information revealed later down the line will fix the problems I have with this movie. That's how canon works for me. I see the story as a timeline, not as a linear experience. And even then, The Way of Water isn't tripping and falling over its own logic or anything. It just has a few depressing shortcomings that are only so depressing because the rest of the movie is so well made. And you could be forgiven for thinking my tone sounded conclusive just now. But this was just as much a video about Avatar: The Way of Water as it was a video about the surrounding discourse and about film criticism as a whole. On that front, I have one more bone to pick. See, there's this thing some of the more conciliatory Avatar critics will do where they'll go, hey, it's okay if you like it. It's just a big, dumb, brain-dead action movie, but you're allowed to enjoy it. Nobody said you couldn't enjoy stupid things. And I find it funny that they don't realize that's an insult, like they genuinely see it as a gesture of respect. So even though I don't think this movie is as well written as the first, I still feel the need to represent both of them from an intellectual angle because I cannot stand shit like this. I'm fine with you telling me why you don't like Avatar, and I understand that there's a fine line between being condescending and dutifully reminding people that they're entitled to their own opinions. But all the same, I'm going to draw that line at you telling me why I like these movies. I swear to God, these people all think they're social psychologists. Like, yes, please, inform me as to how my brain works. I would love to hear your sweeping anthropological conclusions about storytelling and society. Clearly you have been blessed with unique insights into how I process the Blue People movies. I guess you're right. I guess I am just looking for dumb sci-fi escapism. Thank you for informing me. I was under the impression that I just wrote and recorded 2 45-minute essays detailing the plot, characters, and themes of the Avatar films while also addressing each of the major criticisms they're faced with and the specific reasons as to why I think they're better through an analytical lens than those unwilling to hold up that lens might believe. I was under the impression that you might have shown up to this discussion equipped with a bit more than the same exact criticisms I've been hearing since 2009, because as we all know, originality is an essential part of what makes something good. I was under the impression that the entire Western world memed itself into genuinely vitriolically hating an IP that by every measurable standard towers over the maggot-ridden carcasses of their 2010s-era comfort food franchises, which by all accounts turned out to be utterly visionless and devoid of passion for anything but the repeat business of fans whom they knew would defend them with a gratuitous dose of shut up and enjoy it. But you all had something to say about the Blue People, didn't you? Even though half of you hadn't fucking seen it, you just had to get your little jab in, because everybody knows they're just stupid CGI movies, right? Everybody knows a story isn't worth anything if it's not a subversive deconstruction, right? Even if its archetypal themes are all but perfectly executed, even if despite its shortcomings it pulls off simple emotional setups and payoffs while juggling advanced sci-fi concepts in a 5-movie plan with more foresight than the rest of Hollywood could even dream of, even if its primitive discourse alone requires someone like me to come and actually fucking discuss it, because God knows all you people can muster up is Smurfahontas bad, but I guess you're right. I guess Smurfahontas is bad. You know, the first 100 million times I heard it, it didn't connect, but you're just so clever. Do you want to make love to me? Is that what this is about? Because I don't think I can resist the raw sexual energy of a fucking doorknob who thinks mashing a bunch of movie titles together and then saying "in space" is the peak of film criticism. You want to kiss me, huh? You want to talk about our feelings? You want to take all the extra space we have in our brains from not thinking critically about Avatar and use it to store our big, beautiful plans for the future? Do you want to spend the rest of our lives together traveling the world as anti-Cameron pilgrims? How about we land in India and we tell his hundreds of millions of fans, actually you just like the pretty colors. How about China? How about Brazil? How about anywhere except an online comments section where nobody's there to hold us accountable for our second-grade reasoning skills? But of course we won't actually converse with them, don't be silly. If we did, we might actually have to say the words Jake and Sully with a straight face, which has been impossible since the internet programmed a Pavlovian canned response into our brains. We might actually have to hold this series to higher standards than a cool screensaver, and God forbid we acknowledge it's anything but. How did these movies become a global phenomenon, guys? I just can't put my finger on it. Surely the archetypal structure we point to as a sign of their low quality isn't the very thing that makes them so accessible to so many and so befitting of the detail that adorns them. Surely what we believe to be their greatest weakness isn't actually their great strength, because in the words of you, real cinema's greatest champion, simple equals bad. I couldn't have said it better myself, and now I'm blushing, because I just can't help but be utterly enamored with the sheer scope of your bulging analytical mind, because I'm carnally aroused by the grip strength it must take to hold on to a bandwagon for so fucking long. Go off. Keep that head empty. And if you're looking for a writing job, I hear The Guardian is hiring. The remainder of this video is just my meditations on video essayism, among other things. I'm done talking about the actual movie for the most part, so proceed with that in mind. In the past, I've talked about why in this sort of video I don't talk about the box office, the casting, the length, the message, the real-world parallels, the behind-the-scenes shenanigans, the cinematography, the score, the VFX, the acting. And while I've handled such points individually in the past, I thought I would try to give a definitive answer for all the marbles. There was a time when I was trying to cover all that stuff, when I was trying to provide all-encompassing commentary, when I was trying to sum it up for the masses and give a verdict. But I realized that I was overexerting and overextending myself into multiple territories that were governed by completely different sets of rules, and then trying to reconcile all of that under a single banner. Have you seen the average YouTube movie review? It's usually something like, Wow, great cinematography. Here's a few pros and cons about the script. Here's what I thought about the message. Here's what my kids thought. Here are my feelings on the soundtrack. Here is my obligatory unspecific praise for the performances. Here's what the director said on Instagram, and here's what I ate for breakfast. In conclusion, this film gets 2 out of 5 stars. And I'm over here like, what fucking equation did you plug all of those categories into to get your 2 out of 5 rating? That's like asking what's 1 plus 2 plus purple plus cauliflower plus Indonesia times the concept of death divided by Kourtney Kardashian. It's nonsense. And when you actually care about producing sound arguments and honing your specific craft, it is hopelessly overwhelming to try and tie up every disparate element of a media discussion under one nice big bow. So I'm not going to do any of that. I'm a writer. This is a writing channel. If I do throw in personal things, be they unhinged Cameron fever dreams or otherwise, I'll make it abundantly clear that they are separate from my actual writing analysis. But as an olive branch to those who might think my practice of singling out writing is the wrong way of doing it, or to those who just can't get excited about a script when other stuff is bogging them down, I will wholeheartedly admit that writing mechanics are not everything, not to the art form, not to the industry, not to my personal feelings, but they are everything I am equipped to talk about. You would not necessarily be wrong if you pointed out that I labeled Avatar as holistically good, despite only focusing on measurable, objective elements of it and discounting the rest as subjective. This was, technically speaking, a logical flaw. My title. No, I'm not going to change it. It's a hood classic. Are you kidding me? But I am going to be more mindful of my language going forward. Since I'm only talking about writing, I'll stop saying this movie is good and stick to this tracks or this is consistent, because without proper qualification, good is a value judgment, and I'm not here to make those. The war over objectivity in art came to an exhausted stalemate long before I even started doing this. With each passing quarrel, I grew closer and closer to throwing myself into an industrial meat grinder, but now I honestly think both sides missed the only correct perspective, which is that A, our language failed the moment it lumped screenwriting, sculpture, videography, and interpretive dance together under the same nebulous label, and B, the sort of art that concerns me cannot be objectively graded, but can at times be objectively analyzed, and that's the sweet spot where I want to exist. If you feel that between all of my anti-meta segments I have not yet justified this decision thoroughly enough, I don't think there's anything else I can say. I'm simply not a commentary channel. While there was a time when all I wanted to do was pump out in-depth critical analysis about all the latest things, my goals have taken a different turn in recent months. And here's why. I've realized that most writing channels on YouTube are actually reading channels. They read stories under the critical lens and offer up profound thematic takeaways. And that can be helpful to a writer, but when push comes to shove, they don't actually explicitly teach you how to do it yourself. The steps, how to construct a dynamic cast of characters from the ground up, how to structure a plot. They're admiring every last detail of the Matrix without actually looking at the code. So in my efforts to offer an alternative, I'm probably not going to make a video about a specific show or film unless I can ground it in a well-defined writing concept. I don't want this channel to just become new thing dropped, here are my thoughts, however profitable that model might be. I feel like it would just become exhausting for me and my viewers, and I feel like there's no way I would be able to deliver meaningful stuff every time. It's also just hard making these, especially since I'm in college and I had a whole career plan laid out before YouTube suddenly crawled out of the woodwork and said, would you like some money, Zoomer? And I was like, sure, why not? I'll make some more videos. It's not like I'll get obsessed again and not be able to do anything else again, right? And it's cool. I enjoy making these a lot and I enjoy hearing everybody's feedback. I have 2 other big videos that are both like 25% done. One of them is the first entry in an experimental 3-parter, so I'm not going anywhere, but I think I'm going to slow down and get my life in order real quick. I have some obsessive compulsive traits that I need to keep in check, and throwing another sparkly side hustle onto the pile was maybe not the best idea at this point in my life. I directed a short film in October and it's in post-production and I need to focus on that. Then there's also my job and the work I'm pursuing down the line, which is all to say that this is going to be one of those quality over quantity channels and its activity will be sporadic even by those standards. That's why I'm not trying to do a Patreon or anything, because I'd feel an unhealthy amount of stress to deliver. A lot of people said that they wanted to help financially support me via that avenue, and I'm flattered, but if it does happen, it won't be for a long time. Okay, though, here's a funny story. So there's exactly one copyright claim on Avatar is Good and I Will Die on That Hill, and it's the last song. It's the Uniting the Na'vi Clans for Battle song, because no matter how much I lowered the volume, the censor would catch it and make the video ineligible for ad revenue. And after 3 or 4 tries, I just said, fuck it, and I uploaded it anyway. I only had like 16 subs, so it's not like I was thinking about ads. But then I crossed the 1,000 subscriber mark in a matter of hours, and I was cleared for AdSense, and I just sat there horrified at how much potential income my stubbornness had cost me. Like months of rent. All because I had to use the song, because I had written and rewritten my rant over and over again. I had done 20 plus takes before I finally got one that lined up perfectly, and there was no way in hell I was going to change it. And now I have to live with that, but it's okay. Bottom line is, Mr. Cameron, if you're watching this, please have your lawyers take down the copyright claim so that I can make some money, please. Subscribe to my channel if you vibe with my flannel. Like my video if you like my video. And if you dislike my video, then consider liking it ironically. On the off chance that you're just desperate to give me money, I have a thing called Ko-Fi. I put that shit down low. Call me your local DJ because I've got big things coming. They're not coming soon, but they're coming. So go forth, copulate, propagate, and remember that I love you all.